process was not created or established by him. It was created and established by his handlers and his controllers.
Let's keep it 1,000 up here, because my pass is hot. My pass has expired for this. The pass has expired. I've been going back and forth with this from day one at ESPN. Let's go. Kaepernick comes from a situation where he's never felt the full weight of these injustices. This is a mixed race guy who was raised by a white family from Wisconsin to Central California.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I said the same thing about Kaepernick many, many moons ago on various videos pertaining to this topic. And cats got upset with me. How could you say that about Kaepernick? I said it. Number one, he's never truly been through the so-called black experience. I mean, what, he got catcalled a few times during Little League? I mean, give me a break.
Beck, that does not disqualify you from talking for us.
Yes, it does. Actually, yes, it does, brother. I have to disagree with you there. If you're biracial or multi-ethnic with a sense of obscurity when it comes to who you are or where you fit in, no, you cannot speak for the so-called black man and woman. Cannot.
Make missteps and miscalculations, it comes back into play. And he never spoke on this when Black Lives Matters movement was at its height.
Because it wasn't time for him to speak on it yet. When the so-called Black Lives Matter movement was going through its process, they were prepping Kaepernick for what he's doing right now. They had to introduce him to the masses first as a quote-unquote star quarterback. And then, of course, they introduce him to his handler, Ness Nitty, and that's when he comes into play. But the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, that's another socialist/Marxist movement that was established overseas by George Soros. I used to have to surprise cats with that information 2 years ago, and now I see that more and more black men understand it. So that's good that cats are waking up to these things, how we're being misguided through a lot of these false movements that are created for us to follow behind. The focus of the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Black Lesbians Matter movement as I call it, is just to place the black woman in the position of leader over the so-called black community, which is very important because they know that the woman is a pawn and that she follows power. She does not really follow quote-unquote freedom. She follows power for herself because they're self-worshippers. The woman is never going to be able to establish any form of solution for a nation of people because she's too self-obsessed. So that's why they put the woman in power. It's the same reason why the serpent came to Eve, because the serpent understands the mind of the woman. The woman is about self-aggrandizement. In the same way the so-called Black Lives Matter movement or Black Lesbians Matter movement is all about the empowerment of women, particularly lesbian women. Those are just the facts. You can go on their website, they'll tell you that themselves. They don't care about the black man at all.
Think about it, 2013, 2014, Ferguson, where Jay-Z is bailing prisoners out and doing protesters out and taking pictures and supporting Trayvon Martin and that family.
Well, that was also part of his brand building. I'm not going to say that Jay-Z did not care about what was going on in Ferguson or Trayvon Martin or Khalif Browder, but that's part of his brand building. And isn't it interesting? Because I have a lot of cats ask me about Khalif Browder. A couple of days after Khalif Browder goes to the Roc Nation offices and speaks to Jay-Z, he commits suicide, quote-unquote suicide. Very strange.
What was Kaepernick? You know what he was? Taking his shirt off, bruh. I knew Kaepernick back then. He was never talking about this. He meets Nessa 2015, all of a sudden 2016 he gets benched. Flip-flop. Nah.
Ding. Ding. Hey, brother, welcome to the channel, man. Welcome to the channel, brother. Cat's finally figuring this shit out. He said he meets Nessa in 2015. As I've already stated, Nessa was quote-unquote dating Alden Smith first. So clearly she was using Alden Smith to get to Kaepernick. And after she got to Kaepernick, that caused a big upheaval in the locker room. Remember, there was a story about Alden Smith smashing the locker room, trying to fight a teammate, got in his car, trying to crash into Kaepernick's car and all that. That was over Ness Nitty.
That still doesn't disqualify you. But
yes, it does. All that shit disqualifies you from leadership.
Nessa comes into play now. But we all know Nessa. Respect to her and her ethnicity, but it's not black.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? So now we got two leaders who don't even feel the weight of the consequences. So guess what you are allowed to do right now?
Preach.
Have convenience. Ain't no cosmetics here, bro. When I'm in Compton, when I'm in South Central and Harlem, that's my childhood to manhood, 0 to 22 years old. Those 3 places, I know what it feels like. When you're talking to Jay-Z, who's been through Marcy Projects, Brooklyn, and all his successes, he's seen this. We both said, go Kaepernick, go. And let the cause blindly support the man. But
Y'all did that. I didn't. I said it was bullshit from the start, but that's okay. We all miss certain things.
character is now coming to question. And then now Eric Reed is taking it and giving them cover. Eric Reed is taking Kenny Stills, another guy. Respect, guys.
No respect for them. They're clowns and they're actors. The both of them. Both of them are trying to compensate for something. Eric Reed, I believe, is under the program, and Kenny Stills, I'm not quite sure what the hell he is. He's certainly a Luciferian, and I'll go through that a little bit later. Kenny Stills is somebody who's just there to act as an agent of chaos, an agent of mischief. Who knows? He could be under the programming too, but I'm not going to go that far with him. But Eric Reed is certainly, he's a part of that trinity of Kaepernick and Ness Nitty.
Another mixed race individual who's not felt the full weight of this. So when you want to take this movement, and I hate to play the race card against my own race. Usually you play the race card against the other races, right? But when I have to see these missteps and these issues all manifest, I get back to the identity of those who are leading it, which has always been in question.
Thank you, sir. That's how you know they can't lead. So I don't know why you would say that it's okay for Kaepernick to lead, even though he's mixed race. Maybe you got to do that for TV. But no, you can't do that. You're not going to see a prime minister of Japan who's half black, half Japanese. They're not going to do that overseas. Now, in certain parts of the Western Hemisphere, and maybe Europe, they'll do that. They'll consider doing that because they push Babylon strongly in those regions. But when you talk about the Eastern Hemisphere and a lot of the Eastern world, I should say, and parts of Africa, what they call the Orient, or what the scriptures refer to as the Oriental portion, the Far East, etc., the Middle East, etc., they know the importance of their leader exhibiting the same culture and the same traits as the populace at large. And so do those who are truly in power. That's why they have proxy leaders who look like the people that they're ruling over, because that's necessary. It's only amongst our people that we're looking for anybody to lead us. There's a reason why so many black people died in Jonestown, Guyana, under Jim Jones, because they were looking for anybody to lead them. Anybody who was willing to love them, they wanted to follow. And that's why they ended up dead.
And now Jay-Z has answered that question. Let somebody who really knows what this is about handle this.
And let me say this also. Not just because you're so-called full-blooded black or dark-skinned black would that make you a good leader. But you do have to be sure of your lineage as a start to be a leader or someone who could even think about being capable. And then, of course, the most important thing is what your doctrine is, what your solutions are, and what the protocol is.
One of the greatest things I've ever heard. Everything I believe was just said. Go ahead.
And listen, from the beginning, I'm going to go to your point. When Colin first did this, first question that popped in my mind was, would he have done this if he was still the Colin Kaepernick that led his team to the Super Bowl? That's
Hell no. And I said that back when it first transpired.
initially for me. But then when he got behind it and did some things in the community, I was all in regards to where he was trying to go with it.
Yeah, he gave away some book bags and some old suits to some ex-convicts. I remember that. Handed out some T-shirts talking about know your rights.
I think the mistake that's going on now with Eric Reed and Colin is this.
They're too emotional, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, I've done my research, read stuff on Jay-Z of where he's come from, the mindset behind the man, the mindset behind the music. In his lyrics, you hear certain things, but you don't understand what the breakdown means behind it.
Yeah.
Well, brother, I gotta pause you there because once again, this is what happens when you have fanboys that get to talking about Jay-Z. Remember, Jay-Z been around for like 30 years, so his top fanboys are gonna be pushing 50, and they get to talking about Jay-Z and how deep his lyrics are. I've heard most of Jay-Z's albums, as I stated. I was deep into the hip hop world back in the 90s and early 2000s. So I remember when Jay-Z was truly at the top before he became ingratiated or engrafted in the overall Kabbalistic world at the very top as a mover and a shaker, to where they can push and promote his name without him even having to put out work anymore. And Jay-Z from back then was all about, his music was all about selling drugs and making money and doing party hits. He even said it himself on the Black album when he said he would rap like Common, but it doesn't make sense to rap like Common because you're not going to make any money that way. So let's not try to reverse engineer his career and front like he's some deep some deep prophet on his rap albums. He's not. Some of his rhymes are intricate. We'll leave it at that. What Jay-Z is an opportunist. He's someone who sees a little opening for him to make money, and he's going to step in.
Deeper meaning in why he says and does the things that he does, because he's grown from, again, being a young man who sold drugs, who admitted this, understood that.
Yep.
Yeah, destroyed his own people. Yeah.
Understood he couldn't get his first record deal, said, you know what, we're going to do this on our own. But we got to do it on the inside. We got to create our own record label in order to compete. So once I get on the inside, I can make systematic changes in order for not only me, but other people that look like me, come from where I come from. Now they can have the opportunity.
Boom.
Do we have a track record of Jay-Z doing that, or do we have a track record of artists who state that Jay-Z robbed them blind? Do we have a track record of artists at Def Jam when Jay-Z became president who stated that Jay-Z was doing them dirty? Remember that back in the early 2000s when he became president of Def Jam and all the artists stated that Jay-Z was doing them dirty? How many people associated with Jigga have ever stated he really empowered me? I mean, give me a break. That's not his thing. Let's keep it at the money angle. Let's keep it at the capitalism angle. That's why he's there. Let's not make him out to be some great philanthropist. Philanthropy is part of his brand building, but that's about it.
Same thing here. Don't be too quick to jump the gun to discredit what's going on. Now, I get why Eric Reid and Colin could be upset because Jay-Z refused to perform at the Super Bowl. Okay, he was an advocate, really voicing a lot of opinions to Colin Kaepernick. Then all of a sudden, this deal gets done, and it's like he really don't go into deep detail on what's going to happen. I can see where they feel a little slighted, but allow this man who's been successful.
They just got trumped. Big bank take little bank. Jay-Z is 007. Colin Kaepernick was 001. He was the agent that they sent in to do a certain job, and he didn't get the job done. And probably wasn't supposed to get the job done. He was there to act as a distraction to set up Jay-Z. It's like the bad cop, good cop. The bad cop screams and yells and whoops your ass, and then when the good cop comes in, who has the same agenda, you're ready to divulge everything because of the disparity in tactics.
Get inside and see what changes he can make, not only for the NFL, the Players Coalition, Justice Reform, which is all tied in to what we're talking about. Allow that process to happen a little bit so you can see exactly what his mindset, or more importantly, sit down and have a conversation with the man and say, here's where we're at.
Now we have hit the sticking point. You know why? We can't have a conversation on this. Colin is not versed well enough in this subject. He never lived it. So therefore you have to study it. He's not well informed enough where these PhDs who are on ground level said, Colin, we've tried to meet with you. He does his own thing. He goes to the beat of Nessa's drum.
Uh-oh. Good job, Wiley. I'm happy that other people are finally noticing this.
Brother, but then JC is sitting there saying, I want to handle this, man, and stop with this whole divide and conquer. This whole, these two brothers going at it. Y'all some simple-minded fools.
You sound like you want to say some simple-minded niggas. That almost came out. But yeah, that's a tactic that the super liberal Negroes use whenever someone doesn't agree with their wokey bullshit. Oh, they trying to play us against each other. Oh, silly ass Shannon Sharp was trying to push that on Undisputed. I almost used that segment, but I said nah, because it was just too stupid. It was just Shannon emoting as usual. And I always say that Shannon is an intelligent brother, but his emotions, they just control him too much.
Our black experience is not monolithic, brother. So Jay-Z can do his way, and Colin, you can do it your way.
The problem is that Colin has no way. So he knows that once he loses steam, he's going to lose attention. He's not going to be relevant anymore. And he has not conversed enough with some of his covens, like Nike and whoever else is backing him, to understand that Jay-Z is in on it. Jay-Z's in on it. It's just that Jay-Z works for Puma and, other sponsors that we don't know about.
We have seen your way, and we don't know what your leadership looks like because you're voiceless.
No, we have not seen what his leadership looks like because it doesn't exist. He wasn't even a good leader when he was quarterback of the 49ers. So how is he going to lead any type of racial change? I mean, give me a break.
You are voiceless in your own message, just like the people who are powerless are voiceless in our society. So
no one is voiceless in this society. It's just a matter of what you're using your voice for. All these people on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, everybody has a voice. It's just a matter of what you use it for.
Jay-Z has said, I'm going to translate this since I know what it feels like if this didn't work right for me. So now you look at this entire situation and you have to address the characters of the individuals because of what is happening in front of us. These guys have misled. And I gave him a pass just like you. I knew Colin when he was all the way up. And he wasn't thinking about this.
Of course not. He was thinking about all that scattered ass out here that wanted him. Colin Kaepernick was known for running through all these broads. All of them. Remember, he was with Tiana Taylor back in the day. And that chick accused him or him and his crew of drugging her and sexually assaulting her. A lot of people forgot that.
When it first happened, I said, oh, my homeboys told me, and people in the organization, he's pouting. You remember day one, he was just sitting there? He wasn't kneeling. And then
yeah, he wasn't kneeling until Nate Boyer told him to start kneeling, as opposed to sitting on the bench. Nate Boyer, another one of his handlers, did a video about him also.
They told him, kneel at least in respect. And he did that.
Yeah, Nate Boyer told him that.
And then all of a sudden, the boat got in the water, and that's where we've been for 3 years.
I just want to add a couple things. The Players Coalition that Malcolm Jenkins started, they've been accomplishing real things.
Yes.
Real things. They've changed a couple laws in Pennsylvania. They're doing some real things inside of prisons.
Well, that's why Eric Reid and Colin Kaepernick got upset at them, because they took some of their shine by actually having some solutions come to fruition. Remember that Eric Reid tried to attack Malcolm Jenkins before the Carolina Panthers played the Philadelphia Eagles, making a complete damn fool of himself. He has no awareness whatsoever. That's how I know something's up with him mentally.
Criminal justice reform. And so this Players Coalition...
Oh, I remember now. Eric Reid was upset because the Football Players Coalition got $89 million from the owners. And he was mad because it wasn't a fresh $89 million. They took $89 million from another cause and gave it over to the players for their social justice initiative. But the owners wasn't supposed to do that, according to Eric Reid and the internet revolutionaries. They were supposed to cut him a new check for $89 million. These guys are so bugged out.
They're mocking is having real impact, and the NFL has invested nearly $100 million in this, and clearly are about to invest more now that Jay-Z's gotten involved. These guys have made a mistake. They said they wanted the NFL to get on board. The NFL got on board, and now they're still throwing a tantrum. The NFL then goes out and gets Jay-Z, a guy that I've criticized him, Jim. Me and you have gone back and forth. But when the man's right, he's right.
Is he right, or is he just at the right place?
So I have to stand there. I have to now praise Jay-Z and say, brother, run with this football.
Well, slow down before you praise him.
Colin don't want to run with it. You run with it.
Colin can't run with it. He's not built to run with it. He's just a worker, i.e. a proletariat. It's Jay-Z's job to take it and go to where only he can take it to, because Jay-Z's being bankrolled. He's being sponsored. He's the proxy. That's his job.
Hats off to him. Hats off to the NFL.
One more thing, and I ain't done. And please add my name to this list of sellouts that goes like this: Jay-Z, Big Boy, Travis Scott, Malcolm Jenkins. Put my name on that list if you want to, because you know what this is? This cause has turned into a validation and a credit for Colin Kaepernick and Nessa's blackness. And let me tell you.
Thank you, sir.
You had your past, and your past has now expired. Jay-Z, do you, as you always handle it, stay above the fray and just make this about action.
I wouldn't say that Jay-Z always stays above the fray. I would say that he always stays behind the curtain, because that's what's most convenient for him. But anyway, that's the end of volume 2 of Do Multiracial People Have Identity Issues? It's good to see that Mr. Marcellus Wiley is starting to come to many of the same conclusions that I was making for you brothers over the course of this narrative for the previous 2 years. So that's a relatively good sign. The only thing of interest now is to see exactly where Jay-Z is going to go with this, because I promise you he's going to do whatever those who are in power, truly in power, behind the scenes bid him to do. That's why the NFL has hired him, quote unquote, in the first place, to act as a proverbial partner. He is 007. He's not just some random dude. He's in to do what Colin Kaepernick couldn't do. So peace. Okay, so now, brothers, this is going to be a very brief epilogue to the video that I just did pertaining to Mr. Colin Kaepernick, Kenny Stills, and Eric Reed, which is titled Do Multiracial People Have Identity Issues Volume 2? And of course, the answer is yes, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's because it's human nature to try to group yourself into a certain collective. And if you're not raised within a culture that you can identify with, you're going to try to search out where you belong. That's human instinct. That's really the instinct of every creature on the earth. What I find interesting about what I call the tortured mulatto, though, is that they seem to believe that due to the notion or the understanding within their mind that they're bringing together opposites, they therefore believe that they are the key to rectifying the quote-unquote racial problems in society. And that's why I state that someone who's multi-ethnic or multiracial, they cannot be the leader of any race that has an understanding of where they need to go and what their problems are. They can be a part of the group, but they cannot be in the leadership position, no, because they're going to have dual allegiances, and that's going to lead to confusion. And therefore, they're going to try to overcompensate to gain the trust of the group that they want to identify with. And that's what we see with people like Colin Kaepernick. We also see it with the person that he's standing next to, J. Cole, who's a very talented rapper. But by his own testimony, he's someone who's always tried desperately to identify with both sides of his lineage, particularly the so-called black side, because at the end of the day, most people who claim to be quote-unquote half black, half white are going to be forced to side with the so-called black side. And in the process of doing that, they're going to have to figure out exactly what the issues are that pervade the so-called black community. But it seems to be rather consistent in their nature that they try to take leadership positions. And once again, no, you can be a part of the collective, but you cannot lead. And when I say you cannot lead, as I've already explained in the video, I'm referring to people who are not quite sure exactly what their lineage is, where it goes back to. There's a difference between people who are multi-ethnic and people who are just confused racially. And Colin Kaepernick comes off to me as someone who is very confused racially. But because he has a quote-unquote global look, I mean, people are not quite sure what the hell he is when you look at him. It's like, is he black? Is he Arabic? Is he Dominican? Is he Puerto Rican? Is he Moroccan? Nobody knows what the hell he really is to look at him. And that makes him the perfect cultural Marxist, global pseudo-revolutionary leader. But once again, you see him here standing next to J. Cole. They both have on shirts that are quote-unquote revolutionary in some way. I doubt if Colin Kaepernick could tell you much about either Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X, but it's good for the image. J. Cole has on a shirt that says, "I know my rights." The main right that the so-called black man needs to know is his right to rule. Because once we accept our right to rule, we accept responsibility for our actions. And we accept accountability for our actions. I mean, at the end of the day, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. But we have to be able to sniff out a lot of the BS. And this entire Kaepernick narrative has been BS from the very start. The reality of the situation is that the men of our nation, the so-called black man, is scared to rule. And he tries to cover for it with this facade about the black woman being God and everybody coming together and let's all love one another. No other race is concerned with global unity as much as the so-called black man is, and he's the most disrespected and disregarded entity on the planet Earth. You should be the main one that wants to rule, but you're the main component that wants everybody to love you, and you want to love everybody else, and don't even love your damn self. And that's why they could set up shills like Colin Kaepernick to mislead our people every which way. But I just find pictures like this very interesting. J. Cole says, I know my rights. The main right that we have to know is our right to rule. There's another photo with two quote-unquote tortured mulattoes, Kenny Stills and Colin Kaepernick. And, I just get the vibe from the both of them that if they had to be an actual so-called black man for a day, they might kill themselves. They might jump over a damn building. Because I cast the tortured mulatto in the same lot with the liberal black woman and the culturally Marxist, super liberal Caucasian. They love to talk about how black people are oppressed. And they love to talk about the plight of the so-called black man for attention for their own cause. But they despise us behind closed doors. They despise us. And the so-called black man has to understand that. We have very few friends. So we have to learn to be friends with ourselves and with one another. But that means we have to accept the code of conduct and adhere to it. But once again, these two dudes wearing t-shirts talking about, I know my rights. Brothers, I promise you, if you live an upright life and every time you move, you're moving with a purpose, you have a far lesser chance of having a negative interaction with the police. Can it still happen? Of course it can. You can drive perfectly on the road and get into a car crash. In that same way, you could be minding your own business and have a bad interaction with the police. But I promise you that if you move with a positive vibe and with a purpose, the chances of bad things happening to you, just in general, but especially with the police, it depreciates. It diminishes drastically. So this person in Colin Kaepernick, he's trying to play on the whole racial vibe of the cops being the number one problem against so-called black people, and that is not the case. We have a lot of issues. The police force is an issue in how they treat our people, but it's nowhere near number one. And Colin Kaepernick, I don't think that he's ever had an issue with the cops. So it's funny to me that this is what he's trying to stand on as a platform. And many people will say, well, that makes him even greater because he's never had a personal issue with the cops and he's still standing up for it. I don't trust someone whose main platform is something that he's never lived. My channel is a pro-truth channel geared towards the so-called black man because I am one. I've lived my whole life as one. And I've lived every experience damn near that we can live or that we can experience. So all I can do is state my perspective because I'm stating it as someone who's lived it. Colin Kaepernick has not lived any of the shit that he talks about. As a matter of fact, the cops did him a favor that day when he was accused, or he and his crew were accused of sexual assault. I believe by Miss Teyana Taylor, currently married to Iman Shumpert. I wonder what happened there. Now, brothers, this is the main photo that I wanted to get to because once again, as I always tell you, brothers, when you see a lot of these pseudo-radicalized individuals who are trying to make a lot out of not much, or a lot out of something that is a deal, but it's not the biggest deal, it's normally because they're a cartoon character. They're a caricature. Kenny Stills has never lived what he's talking about, but he knows that he's gone so far that he has to keep going. It's almost like an undercover cop or undercover operative or agent. They just have to keep going. Like Leonardo DiCaprio in the film The Departed. He went so far acting like he was a gangster. He got strung out on antidepressants because at any moment he was scared that he was going to get found out. That's how Kaepernick and Kenny Stills come off to me, and Eric Reed. Like they're playing roles. But just look at his shirt really quickly. As I tell you, brothers, whenever they try to push these culturally Marxist themes, it's to hide the Luciferianism. They use the black man's plight as a veneer, as a facade, to promote what they're actually about. Look at his shirt. It says, I don't have time for hate, quote unquote hate, which is an open-ended term. Racism, which itself can be an open-ended term, even though we pretty much know what racism is. Misogyny, which of course is going into the concept of alleged hate for women, but actually is more about venerating the woman and going along with her delusions about quote-unquote equality. Ableism, which is basically the concept of not discriminating against those who are quote-unquote handicapped or who may have been born with a certain ailment where they might be considered less than a regular person, whether it be mentally or physically. Say, for example, people who might be considered mentally retarded or who are in a wheelchair, so on and so forth. He claims that he's against ableism. Now, that's something that anybody would be against. You want people to be treated fairly, but we're not equal. And that's why I say that term equality, that's a very insidious term. It's right there with misogyny and homophobia and other terms that are used to try to embarrass people into accepting Luciferian ideologies. Let's just read the rest of his shirt. He says he's against homophobia. I would have to ask Kenny Stills certain questions about how STDs are getting propagated so rapidly in that quote-unquote community and how they're being transferred over into other communities and what he has to say about that. Why is it that the prison industrial complex is directly linked with the propagation of STDs through the promotion of homosexuality amongst inmates who thereafter come home and have intercourse with silly liberal women? That's plaguing our community. It has been for the last 40 years. I would have to ask him these questions. These are stats that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, have provided. I'm not saying that. They've said that. He says that he's against Islamophobia. Well, you know what's interesting? Since he says that he's against Islamophobia, Islam also speaks against the concept of transsexual. So my point is this: it's impossible to be against everything. It's impossible to accept everything. This is why I call these people agents of chaos. They don't have the discernment to actually make sure and righteous judgments. So what they want to push on the people is to accept everything. When you open your door for everything, good things are going to come into your house and bad things are going to come into your house. That's why we have doors and locks and peepholes, so that we can vet everything that we let into our home. And of course, it ends with bigotry. I would honestly love to ask Mr. Kenny Stills if he dislikes or quote unquote hates Donald Trump, just to see what he would say. I'm pretty sure that he'd probably have a programming breakdown, because at the very top of his shirt, he says that he doesn't have time for hate. But if he were to say that he doesn't hate Donald Trump, he might lose a lot of the favor that he's been able to build up on social media, because he's a social media addict, just like everybody else in his clique. Colin Kaepernick and Ness Nitty and Eric Reed, they live through social media. And that's why you see certain elements in the mainstream liberal media get upset whenever it comes to this Kaepernick storyline, because they've used him over the last 3 years to build up their profile. Jemele Hill has been able to transition from being a C-level sports journalist to being a woke journalist on the internet because of Kaepernick. Shannon Sharpe has been able to build up a huge profile for himself by acting as if he's woke or socially conscious when he's on Undisputed. And I've been saying this about Shannon for the last 3 years. And I love Shannon on TV. He's very entertaining. But he's also a bullshit artist when it comes to race. Go ahead and Google Shannon's name and show me any photos of him on Watts, or on Slauson, or in Compton, trying to build with the so-called black people there, since he claims to be a man of the people. As a matter of fact, show me any footage of LeBron James out there. Everything that LeBron does when it comes to wokeism is just about brand building. It always has been. And as I've told you, brothers, for a very long time, Nike is coordinating this movement, this woke movement, with Serena Williams, with LeBron, with Odell Beckham Jr., with Kobe Bryant, with KD. That's just a part of how they market their athletes now. because they have a lot invested in pushing this energy, because Nike's being controlled by the cultural Marxists, and they also want Donald Trump, or that energy from Donald Trump, out of the so-called White House. So they're using their athletes to engage in a proxy war against Donald Trump. It's all phony. Every bit of it's phony. But just to get back to Shannon Sharpe, once again, if you Google him, you're only going to see photos of him either playing football or working out. He's not hands-on with the people, because once again, he's been using the Kaepernick storyline to build up his profile on the internet. There's a bunch of woke Negroes that they go to Shannon Sharpe's IG and shout him out for talking all the shit he talks on Undisputed. I would love to see him on Speak for Yourself with Whitlock and Marcellus Wiley, to see them have a real debate. I would love to see Speak for Yourself invite Van Lathan on their show. That would be nice to see them go back and forth, because Van Lathan, once again, he's woke. He's someone who's tried to build his profile off of the concept of wokeism. But just to get back to this, brothers, once again, that's what the kneeling thing has always been about, as I've been trying to tell you. They use the plight of the so-called black man as a veneer, as a facade. What you see on his shirt is actually what they're concerned with, especially the part about misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. Those are the main core tenets that they're interested in attacking, not so-called racism. They'll do certain things for the so-called black man as long as you're down with all these main points on his shirt. So anyway,